Night shift at small hotels are usually boring. Nothing happens, no guests, no noise, just silence and security cameras. But one night, a man checked into the hotel. At least that's what I thought, because an hour later, when I checked the system, there was no record of him ever existing, no payment, no reservation, no room. And yet, he was still inside the building. This happened about a year ago when I was working the overnight shift at a small hotel. At first, everything seemed normal. A man came in, asked for a room, paid with a card, and went upstairs. But later that night, I discovered something disturbing. The hotel system had no record of his check-in, and security cameras showed him wandering through the building and standing outside guest rooms. To this day, I still don't know what his real plan was. But I do know one thing. That man never should have been inside that hotel. The hotel I worked at was pretty small, 3 floors and maybe 40 rooms in total. Weeknights were quiet. Usually only 10 or 15 rooms were occupied. My shift was from 10 p.m. until 6 a.m., and most of the time, I just sat behind the desk doing paperwork or checking the cameras. The lobby was small too. A front desk, a couple couches with a TV, and vending machines in the corner. Behind the desk was a little office with a computer and a glass window so I could still see the lobby. At night, the front doors locked automatically, so guests had to buzz in and I would press a button to let them enter. Most nights, nothing happened after midnight, but one night around 11 p.m., a man buzzed the door. He looked like he was in his mid-40s, tall and thin, wearing jeans, a baseball cap, and carrying a backpack. He walked up to the desk and asked if we had a room available. I told him we did and gave him the price. He pulled out a credit card. I swiped it. The machine beeped like the payment went through, so I handed him a key card for room 214. Before leaving though, he stared at me for a few seconds. Not angry, not smiling. Just a completely blank expression. Then he turned and walked toward the elevator. At the time it felt strange, but not dangerous. About an hour later, I looked up from my phone and noticed he was back in the lobby. He didn't come to the desk. He just walked over to the couches and sat down facing the TV, which wasn't even turned on. At first, I thought maybe he couldn't sleep. Some guests sit in the lobby late at night, but after 30 minutes, I realized he hadn't moved at all. He wasn't on his phone. He wasn't reading. He wasn't even blinking much. He was just staring straight ahead. At one point, I got up to grab water from the vending machine. As I walked across the lobby, I could feel him watching me the entire time. When I got back behind the desk, the feeling in my chest was awful. Around 1 a.m., I opened the reservation system on the computer because I was bored. That's when something weird appeared. Room 214 was listed as vacant. I frowned and refreshed the system. Still vacant. I checked the check-in logs. Nothing. No name. No payment. No record at all. Then I checked the payment transactions. There was no credit card charge. My stomach dropped. I clearly remembered swiping his card. But according to the system, it never happened. I picked up the phone and called room 214.
Yes, right away.
It rang 10 times. No answer. Then I checked the key card entry log. It showed every time someone opened a room door. Room 214 showed 0 entries. That meant he never even went to the room. Slowly, I turned and looked toward the lounge, and there he was, still sitting there, still staring at the dark TV. At that moment, a horrible feeling settled in my chest. Around 1:30 a.m., I walked over and asked if everything was okay. He slowly turned his head and looked at me. His expression hadn't changed. "I just can't sleep," he said quietly. Then he turned back to the TV. I nodded and walked away, but my hands were shaking. Around 2 a.m., I looked up again. He wasn't in the lounge anymore. I scanned the lobby. Then I saw him. He was standing in the hallway near the bathrooms, half hidden in the darkness, just standing there, completely still. I pretended to work on the computer while watching him in my peripheral vision. Eventually, he walked back and sat down again, like nothing happened. By 3:30 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I called the non-emergency police line and explained that there was a man in the building who might not be a guest. While I waited, he stood about 15 feet from the desk, just staring at me. Not blinking, not speaking, just watching. Finally, around 4:10 a.m., 2 officers arrived. I let them in and pointed toward him. He was sitting on the couch again. They questioned him for a few minutes and asked for ID. Then they walked him outside. One officer came back and explained what happened. The man was never a guest. The credit card he gave me was stolen, and he had no reservation at all. He had only pretended to check in so he could get access to the building. They arrested him for trespassing and credit card fraud. But what still scares me is realizing that he had spent hours inside the hotel, wandering the hallways and standing outside guest rooms. And nobody noticed. I still don't know what he planned to do that night, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't anything good. And to this day, I hate working night shifts in hotels. Working alone at night is already uncomfortable, but imagine a stranger walking into your store and knowing things about you that you never told anyone. Your name,
Alex, is it?
your schedule, even the way you write letters. That happened to me. And the worst part, he had been watching me for weeks. Meredith was 24 and worked the night shift at a tiny gas station off a quiet county road. Most nights were silent, just the buzzing lights and empty highway. One night around 1 a.m., a man walked in, mid-40s, messy hair, green coat. He walked straight to the counter and stared at her. "You always work this late," he said. Meredith forced a polite smile. "Yeah, mostly." He smiled slightly. "I figured. I've passed by a few times." Then he said something that froze her. "Meredith, right?" She wasn't wearing a name tag. Before she could ask how he knew, he pointed to the whiteboard where she had written, "Cinnamon coffee is back." "You have nice handwriting," he said. "You dot your I's with little slashes instead of circles." After that, the man started appearing randomly, sometimes inside the store, sometimes sitting in his car in the parking lot with the headlights off. One night, he leaned on the counter and asked quietly, "You ever get scared working alone out here?" Another time, he casually mentioned he noticed she checked the back room door every night around 2 a.m. That meant he had been watching her closely. Then one night, Meredith returned from a break and found something on the counter, a Polaroid photo. It was a picture of her outside the gas station filling the windshield washer tank, taken from extremely close. She finally called the police. When they searched his car, they found a notebook. Inside were pages filled with her schedule, her clothes, her routine, and her name written again and again, over and over, until the words turned into scribbles. He kept telling the officers the same thing. "I'm just a curious guy. Meredith got a restraining order and moved 2 hours away. But even today, whenever headlights stay behind her car for too long, she still feels that cold sensation crawl up the back of her neck. Most night shift workers get used to strange sounds, creaking floors, buzzing lights, doors opening. But one night, the bell at the front desk kept ringing, and every time I checked, no one was there. Until the third time it rang, because this time, I saw what was pressing the bell. Daniel worked nights at a quiet rural motel. Around 2 a.m., the front desk bell rang. He walked to the lobby. Nobody. 10 minutes later, the bell rang again. Still
Hello?
nobody.
Is anyone here?
The third time it rang, Daniel sat behind the desk waiting. 15 minutes passed. Then suddenly, ding right in front of him. A pale hand slowly reached up from under the desk and pressed the bell. Daniel ran to the back office and locked the door. On the security camera, he watched a man crawl out from beneath the desk. The man walked around the lobby calmly, then headed toward the hallway that led to Daniel. A moment later, the back office door handle slowly rattled. Daniel called 911. When police arrived, they found the front door had been propped open with a rock, but the man was gone. To this day, Daniel still thinks about that pale hand rising from under the counter, because that means the man had been hiding there, only a few feet away from him, the entire time.